JRR Tolkien, architect of Middle-earth. One day I spied a beautiful 3-volume boxed edition of The Lord of the Rings on my friend Julian's shelf. For the first few chapters it seemed only an adult fairy tale, and not particularly engrossing either. But I persevered and soon saw more significant things. The writing was exceptional, the scholarship impeccable, but what finally swayed me was the author's incredible imagination. Tolkien had created not only an entire world, but a cosmology whose totality was absolutely staggering. Middle-earth had a history, a language, a culture so complete, and a continuity so detailed that it was difficult for me to believe it did not exist, indeed had never existed, save in the author's imagination. Once hooked, I read all 3 volumes non-stop. It was only after I finished the last volume, on Christmas Day, that I noticed how worn Julian's hardbound edition was. It had obviously been read many times. But what was the meaning of The Lord of the Rings? I immediately began searching for historical parallels, events in our own past upon which Frodo's quest to return the evil ring of power to its place of creation/destruction could possibly be based. There were none. I then considered a Freudian alternative, that the trilogy was symbolic of some stage of our evolution or development, or an allegory about the quixotic romantic having to adapt to our modern world. Perhaps the characters represented personality traits in our psyche. But such speculation seemed like trying to fit round pegs into square holes. I overlooked, of course, what was obvious to the millions of Tolkien admirers throughout the world. The Lord of the Rings, as well as The Hobbit, were written for the sheer pleasure of it all. Indeed, Michael Tolkien confirmed this in a letter to me, saying, "My father wrote primarily for his family and for his own amusement, and was only persuaded against his will to publish at all." Tolkien, a distinguished philologist and acknowledged authority on Nordic mythology, wrote the books simply in order to entertain, and to satisfy a need to express the highly imaginative ideas and insights that his cross-discipline gave him. The story of Middle-earth is objectively unreal. It exists only on paper, and now, of course, also on film. But ask any Tolkien reader what he felt or thought as he read about Frodo's flight from the Dark Horseman, Gandalf's desperate life-and-death struggle with the Balrog, or Ewan's slaying of the Nazgul, and you are likely to discover fear, fright, anticipation, anger, desperation, emotions that are normally produced by experiences in the real world. Tolkien was able to transform a tale into real flesh-and-blood emotions and responses. The reader makes an unconscious agreement with the writer to allow imagination to become reality. The Lord of the Rings has an appeal that transcends geographical and temporal limits. It creates and satisfies that wistful longing for a time when the world seemed less complicated. Perhaps, if we had a choice as to how our era would be remembered by future generations, it would be not as one of world wars, nuclear weapons, and social convulsions, but as the century in which Middle-earth was created.